Hello everybody, my name is Kyle Lee, aka Kilo Loco from kiloloco.com, and today we're going to be going over URLSession, how to make a multi-part or form data request in Swift. Today we're going to be using Xcode 8.2.1, Swift 3, and the Imager API. Unfortunately, the skill level for this tutorial is going to be advanced. I was hoping that it wouldn't be advanced. I was hoping to try to move it down to intermediate, but there is just so much stuff that goes into this tutorial that you have to understand, because it's already going to be a very long tutorial. And for me to go into everything, it's gonna be too many different topics to cover. What I need you to understand is some understanding of object-oriented programming, how to make classes / structs, and be able to use those in the code. At least have some understanding of how class extensions work, because we're going to be doing an extension of one of the NS one of the NS objects. We're going to be doing an extension of that, and then have some type of familiarity with type aliases. This is kind of very minor, but just you might want to know how that works. Also, you're going to want to know how to use URLSession, just the basics with JSON. If you don't know how to do that, you might want to go check my other videos using or doing get and post requests with URLSession. We're going to do get and post requests using multipart form data in this tutorial, but it's a little bit easier and a little bit different, and as long as you understand how to use URLSession, you should be good. And then also understanding of how to follow API documentation. Like I said, we're going to be using the Imager API. I'm not going to go into too much depth on how to get that all set up. I'll go through each of the steps so you can see how to do it, but I don't plan on explaining very much. Before I start, I want to just say that multipart form data is not a pretty thing in Swift. If you can, or if you know how, I would recommend using Alamofire. The only reason I would say that you should use URLSession is if you want full control over your networking requests. Like if you plan on doing something very special with your networking, then this is when you would want to use URLSession. But other than that, I would highly recommend using Alamofire, because that would be just something that's a little bit more intermediate as opposed to being advanced. Alright, so let's get into it. Alright, so we're going to start off with a brand new project. And let's get this going. Single view application, and we'll call this URLSession multipart form data MPFD, and all this stuff looks fine. Move forward. Nope. And as you can see, I don't know if you saw that, but I actually did go through a test run to make sure that I know how to explain this. This isn't something that you're going to want to memorize. This is just going to be so that you know how to implement it. I highly recommend that you copy and paste this code from the GitHub repository that I make at the end of this video. It'll be so much easier for you. Let's go ahead and remove this. We're going to set up our storyboard real quick, get that out the way. Alright, let's get some buttons in here. I'm not going to do any layouts or anything like that. Let's just keep it simple. We'll do a get request, so you can see how easy it is to do a get request with multipart form data, and then post request. It turns up the complexity a lot once we get there. And also, let me make this window a lot bigger. We're gonna need it. All right, go ahead, put them in as actions. Call this get request. Call that post request. And all this code is going to be done extremely ugly, guys. Extremely ugly. Everything's going to be done in the view controller, with the exception of one of the models that I'm going to make. But other than that, everything's going to be done very ugly. So once again, you should know how to do a lot of this stuff and be able to extract this information and incorporate it into your project as needed. I'm going to be running simulations with the iPhone SE. All right, so let's get into it. So the first thing that we got to do is we have to just start off like any URL session that you would normally do. We have to get the URL and turn it into a request. So let's go ahead and do that. URL from a string. And you know what? I'm going to use the same. I'm going to be using the JSON placeholder URL that we've been using if you've been following along on my tutorials. So just go to Google, JSON placeholder. It's going to be the first result that pops up. And for the get request, we can just do, I like to do users. So let's get this and put users at the end of it. All right, so that will be that. Now we have to make our request, which will be a URL request. And we're going to do it from a URL, which we just made. All right, so next, what we want to do, as usual, we're going to want to set. Well, not as usual. This is something that's a little bit different between JSON. You're going to actually want to set the value, make sure that there's no values in there for the header. And I'll get to the value in a second, but I like to talk about the header field first. And the value that we want, the header field that we want to access first is going to be of content type. And what we want to let and this is essentially telling the API what we're going to be doing, what the content is consists of, what kind of requests we're trying to make. So with that being said, what we're going to type in here is going to be multipart / form data. Multipart / form data, right? And there's another thing that we also have to do is we have to set a boundary for this request. Now boundaries are they're like parameters for the API, so that for the server to let the server know that the entire request is consisted. It pretty much marks it as tags. Like it's really hard to explain. The boundaries are something that's needed for the server to let it know that all the information that you're sending in the request, all the data that you're sending in the request, belongs all to each other. Like they're all part of the same request. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to generate a boundary. Now you can literally pass in anything, but it's nice to kind of have something that's not going to be hard coded, because you don't want to be sending that every time, just for like security issues, because it's going to be popping up in the request. So what we want to do is we actually want to do a function. We want to make a function that's going to create a random boundary for us every time. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just call it generate boundary. And the boundary is going to be returned to us as a string. And all we have to do is just return something. I like to go ahead and preface it with the word boundary. It doesn't have to be there, but that's what I do. And then in here, I'm going to get a random value by accessing the NSUUID. And I actually want to initialize this, and then I want to get the string value of that. So UUID string. So I just do it like that, and that's all we have to do. this it's still pretty simple. And then we have to pass in a boundary. So to make sure that we are constantly passing the same boundary, let's just make a constant called boundary, and let's generate that boundary. All right, so it's going to generate a boundary, and now we're going to pass it in here, but we have to pass it in with interpolation. So boundary. So now we have our boundary in there. Good. So it's already getting a little bit more complex than your normal request, but this is what has to be done. All right, so now that we have our boundary in there, now we can actually do our body. We can just, well, actually, we're not passing a body. We just want to get the users back. So for a normal GET request, we don't have to pass a body, but you could, and this would be normally where you're going to do it. But let's just, you know what? Yeah, let's go ahead and make a body. Let's pretend like we're going to make a body because we're going to have to do this for post requests anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a body. I'm sorry, guys. Like this is, like I said, it's a very complicated topic. So I'm going to be bouncing around. I'm not going to really know how to go about explaining exactly what I'm trying to do, because this is something that you don't want to consistently go through. You want to just have some of this information set. So let's just pretend like we're going to pass in some like a photo in here, because usually that's what you want to do for multi-part form requests. So what I'll do is I'll actually make a new file, and I'm just going to call it media. Now this media could be, you know, photos, videos, audio. But let's just go ahead and since it's going to be a value type, I'll just make it a struct. Now, some of the things that are absolutely necessary for making a multi-part form request are that you have a name, also known, you might think of it as a key. It's kind of like a parameter, the key for the parameter. You have to have a file name for whatever the file that you're passing. So if it's a photo, you might want to call it my photo, or you might want to timestamp it or something like that. You're also going to need the data from that photo, and then you're also going to need a MIME type from that. So let's go ahead and make those out right now. So you're going to need a key, and this will be of type string. We're going to have a file name. This will also be of type string. We're also going to have data that we have to pass to the API. So that'll be of type data. And then we're going to have a MIME type. Now, usually what I would do is I would make enum for the different MIME types that you can send. But just to go a little bit quicker, we're going to do it with a string. And also I said that we want to just assume that we're going to be passing a photo. You can do this many different ways. Essentially, also what I would do is I would make a multimedia protocol, and then I would explicitly make different models for the types of media that I would be passing to the API, but we're not going to do that this time. So let's do a init with let's do an image. We want to send it to image, and we'll just pass in a UI image. And then for key, once again, this is like the name or the parameter name that we're going to be passing, and this is going to be a string. And this is all we really need to do to initialize this class. Everything else we're going to take care of on the inside. So self.key is going to be equal to key, right? Self.MIME type, and like I said, it's going to be an image, so I'm just going to pass in image here. Once again, this is not the way that you want to do it if you're planning on scaling this or making this reusable. Next, we want to do file name, and the file name, it could just be whatever. It's going to be a string, but I'm just going to call it whatever. So I want to create a random value. Let's just use arc for random, right? And then also I have to specify that it has a file extension. So let's just do JPEG, right? And you're gonna see all this take effect. So if you don't completely understand why I'm doing it this way, you'll see it. I've gone through the process, so I know what I need. But just trust me, we're gonna need this. We're gonna have to pass some type of media over and convert all this media into actual just data, and then pass that to the API. So that's why we're doing it this way. Next, we need to get the data of the image. Oh, you know what? I'm using the wrong font now that I know that some people watch this on phones. Sorry, it's halfway into the video. So let's data is equal to UI image representation, or what is it? UI image JPEG representation, and then we're gonna pass in our image. And then compression quality, let's just do 0.7. Let's just say we want to compress it a little bit or whatever. That's fine. And then want to return. And actually, if I can't get data, then I don't even want to have the media. So let's just make it a failable initializer. And we can return nil right here. And then self.data will be equal to data. All right. So we have our initializer in place, and everything should work as expected for this model. Now let's switch back over to our view controller and then get this all implemented. All right, so now we are at the set value, and we're not going to really use any of this, but it's going to make sense in a couple of seconds. It's going to make more sense for post requests, but I wanted to get through and make it more consistent how you do the get request and the post request, or else they're going to look like very different from one another. So now that we've got that out the way, next step, let's go ahead and we want to add the actual, we want to make the data that we can send to the server, right? So we're gonna also have to create a function that's going to create the body for us. So let's do create data body, whatever you want to call it, and this will return data. Now this will be whatever happens here. Let's just make sure that Xcode's not going to explode on us. When we create this data body, this is going to be what's going to be sent in the request HTTP HTTP body. So let's just say let data body equal create data body, and then request will equal data bot HTTP HTTP body will equal data body. All right. Once again, sorry if I'm not being clear. This is like a very complicated subject, and there's several different ways to do this. The way that I'm doing it is a little bit more scalable by making this, media, and it makes it easier to read. But going through the process the first time, it doesn't seem too clear. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to have a variable called body in here, and this is going to be of course equal to data. It's going to be empty data, and we're going to be manipulating this body. We're going to be adding data to it, and then that eventually we'll be able to pass the body as what's being returned with all the different changes that we're going to be making to it. So before I go any further, once again, another thing that's going to not make sense out of context is that you're going to have the idea of passing line breaks. So when you're sending a request, you have in a multi-part form request, what you have to do is you have to send the parameters, and you have to set different headers and different parameters for your parameters, and they have to all be followed by line breaks. So what the line breaks look like are like this. They're strings, and you do r/n, and you might have noticed that n is usually a new line. Like if you wanted to do it in code for your iOS app, like if you typed in \n, that would do a new line. For Linux, it's \r, right? But we don't know which one, what kind of server, what kind of operating system the server is working with, and all this other stuff. And Windows actually requires both. So if we pass in both, it'll be universal. So any server should be able to read this as a line break. And we'll see where the line breaks are being put in. There are some rules that you have to follow, and it's very specific. Like you have to do it line by line. Like it has to be done in the right way, or else none of this stuff will work. Also, for when we're creating this data body, we're going to want to be passing in a few things. We're going to have to change our parameters into data. We're going to have to change the media, like the photo or the audio file or the video. We have to change that into data. And then we also have to pass in our boundary, so that once again the server knows that all this data is related to each other. Like it's not different types of requests. So let's go ahead and start off with that. So we'll do I'm in the generate boundary spot. I want to be in the create data spot. So create data body, and we're going to do with parameters, and then this could just be params, whatever. And I'm actually going to do a type alias up here just because it looks a little bit cleaner. Completely unnecessary, but I like it. So I'm going to just call this parameters, and I'm actually going to do it plural. Whoa. Parameters. And this will just be of type string, a dictionary of string and string, because your parameters essentially should be strings by the time you hit this API, or by the time you hit this function. Like you should be doing the conversions yourself and then passing them as that. So parameters, and this will be optional because you're not always going to be passing parameters. Next, we're going to do media, right? Because we want to pass in some type of media, and this can be an array. We want to do an array of media because we don't know, like if we're going to be sending multiple pictures with one request. Maybe we want to send like a thumbnail of a video, so that's going to be a photo. And then we also want to send the video, so we want to be able to have an array. So we want to be able to send two things, right? So that's going to be an array of media. But when we're doing multi-part form requests, maybe we don't always want to have media in there for whatever reason. You should be using JSON, but whatever. If you can't use JSON and you have to use this, then you have to use this. So we're going to make this also optional. And then one thing that is not optional is the boundary. You absolutely have to pass the boundary. Once again, we want to make sure that all of our data is related to each other by this boundary being spread throughout. Now, this is where a lot of this stuff is going to start coming together, and I'm going to go through and explain this. But trust me, it does get a little bit confusing because it has to do with a lot of web API type stuff. And it's like I said at the beginning of this, if you don't have anything specialized that you want to do with your request, then just use Alamofire. But if you have to use this, then I'm gonna help you try to understand what's going on when you use this. So first we want to make sure that there are parameters if we're going to be changing the data of the parameters. So if let parameters equal params because that's what we called it, right? Params. Then we're going to go in here. Now, if we're in here, that means that we have parameters, and what we're going to do is, since it's a dictionary essentially, for we'll just call this key, and we'll call this part value. Call it whatever you want, as you probably already know. In parameters, in our unwrapped value, we're going to go inside. All right, for key value in parameters. Okay, that's good. All right, so before I move on, we're going to have to append a lot of data to this body for the parameters, but you can't append a string into data. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an extension real quick. And it's just a really quick extension. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So we're going to be extending our data. So when this means that it can be using whatever we want to do with data. The new functionality that we have in here can be used throughout the entire app, or throughout the entire code. So we have a function called append. It already has a couple of different appends, but we want to be able to append a string and then add it in as data. So we don't want to give it a name, and we'll just be passing in a string, right? And then we have to verify that the data is actually there. So we have to do if let data is, and then we'll do string, and we're going to do a string from this data, and then we're going to also do encoding. And safe practice has always been in web development is just to default to UTF-8, so we're just going to do that, UTF-8. And if we can do, if we can create data from this string using encode, this type of encoding, then we do have valid data in there. And from there, we can always append data to data. So append other data. See that? That's one of the default functions of data. So we can just add in data right there. But there's a problem that actually pops up. Since this is modifying the actual data, not this data, but it's modifying the data that it's referencing and mutating it, we actually have to specify that this is a mutating function, because it's going to be changing whatever is calling that. It's not making a copy of it or anything like that. So whatever is calling this function is going to be itself changing. All right, so now we're going to start using this. So we want to get all the data for the parameters and append it to this body. So body.append, and we're going to be using strings. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to preface our boundary with 2 dashes, and then we can pass in our boundary. Right? Now, after we pass in our boundary, what we have to do is we also have to put in a line break. So I'll just do it like that. Since they're both strings, I can concatenate them like this, and it will work. So it'll be boundary with the 2 dashes in front of it, and then it will come down to the next line, not in the code, but in the actual request. Right? Next, we have to do content disposition. So let's go ahead and body.append. And once again, we're doing our string, and we have to do content disposition. Make sure you spell all this right. Capitalization is done correctly, because all this stuff is very important. The content disposition is going to be form data. And then we also have to specify the name or the key of what the API is supposed to be expecting. So this is like if one of the mandatory parameters that you pass to this API is user ID or auth token or token ID or something like that, then this is where you would specify it. So we have to put that in, but the API recognizes it as name. So we pass in name, And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass in our key, right? And this key actually has to be surrounded by quotes. So we have to escape the quotes and put them in like this. So the key has to be surrounded by quotes. After we surround it by quotes, then we have to do 2 line breaks. I know this doesn't make any sense, and this is probably the best way that it probably can be explained by another iOS developer. If there's a web developer that's watching this for whatever reason, then you probably know a lot more than me on this subject. But this is not an easy thing to really understand if you don't have experience in web development. All right, lastly, and the reason why we did 2 line breaks as opposed to just 1 line break is because next we're going to be actually passing the main part of our data. So the parameters are going to be turned into data, and since we're not prefacing it with something like content disposition or anything like that, we have to put 2 line breaks in front of our major data. So we'll go ahead and pass in value. Make sure we interpolate that. And then we also have to end it with a line break. All right. And that's all you have to do for parameters. That's all you have to do for parameters. But unfortunately, if you want to pass in media, you have to do the same thing, but it's a little bit different, a little bit more complex. So let's go ahead and go through that process real quick. So we'll do if let media, and we'll just call it media. If let media is equal to media, then for since we know that it's going to be a photo, for this time we could just call it photo, but you might want to call it item or something like that for photo in media. What we're going to do is we have to do the same thing. So body.append, not the unsafe buffer, but the actual string like we had stated before, and preface it with 2 dashes, and then interpolate the boundary. Whoa, missed. The boundary followed by a line break. Now we're going to do, once again, we're going to do body.append, and we still have to do content disposition, but this is where things switch up a little bit. So disposition, I have to make sure that I spell that right, or else this will not work and it will be very hard to debug. So we're going to do it as form data. We have to do name once again because there's still going to be a parameter key that the API is expecting you to pass it in as. So make sure that we escape those quotes, and then we have to interpolate, and we're going to pass in our, well, since this is media, we can't just pass in key, we have to do a photo. Remember that our photo does have a value called key, and we're going to pass that in. Then we have to close the quotes. Remember that. Very important. Now, from here, we actually have to specify the file name because you have to name your file something. So the photo has to be called something like my photo, or the random number that we have specified for whenever the media object is initialized, remember? So it has to have a file name, and we're just doing arc4random.jpg. So it'll be some random number and then JPEG. And actually, I'm not sure if the number will work. So let me just prefix this called photo. This way we can be sure that there's no weird bugs, because sometimes sending numbers as a file name can be a little bit weird, especially on different APIs. So we have to specify the file name. File name is equal, once again, surrounded in quotes, and you have to escape those quotes, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to type in photo and get our file name. All right, got it. And then after that, we actually have to do another line break, just like up here. But we're not going to do two because we're not passing in our main form of data. We're not passing in the main data next. We actually have to do one more thing before we pass in the main data. So we'll just do one line break. All right, I think that looks right. Yeah, that looks right to me. So body, and once again, this is very hard to debug if you get something wrong. So we're gonna append data. Next, we actually have to specify the content type. So before we said that, the API is going to be of type form data, but now we have to specify what type we're actually trying to upload. Like we have to say the content of the data is, it's going to be a photo, or it has to be a video, or whatever, right? So we have to specify the content type. So what we're going to do is we're going to interpolate the actual MIME type. So we'll do photo dot MIME type. I did MIME type, right? Yeah, photo dot MIME type. And then after this, we're going to be sending in our main data. So we're going to do the 2 line breaks. And that's it for that line. And then, like I just said, we're going to be appending the main data. So we'll do body dot append, and then this time it won't be our function call is actually going to be appending the other data, because remember we have the media has a property called data, so we just want to put that in there. And then just like everything else, you want to separate that with a line break. And I can't do a line break up there because you can't append a string after this. So remember, each of these green ones are strings, and this one's actually appending data. So we'll just put in line break right there. And after all this, if any of this is going through, because you can specify nil for any of these parameters or for these arguments, if any of this goes through, no matter what, it does have to be ended with another boundary to say that this is where the boundary ends. This is the end of all my data that's related to each other. So we want to do body dot append, and we're gonna preface it with 2 line breaks. Interpolate it, right? We're gonna pass in our boundary. Do another 2 line breaks. This is what says that this is the end of my boundary, and then we want to then end it with another line break. So dash dash, put in your boundary, and then the following dash dash says that this is the end of all the data that's related to each other, and then you do a line break. So this is the hardest part. If you could understand, if I was able to explain this to you in a way that you could understand, then this was the hardest part of it. And you won't really need to do much more after that. I have 16% battery, so give me a second. I just have to plug in my charger. All right, I'm back. All right, so now that we have our create body and we've already assigned it as such, we don't have all the arguments in there properly. So let's go ahead and enter our arguments. Now with a regular GET request, we're not going to need any parameters, so we could do nil. Once again, I said this was I kind of did it a little bit early. We're not passing we're not passing in any media, but we do want to pass in our boundary. And then we have our HTTP body right there. So this is where everything just kind of starts going back to normal. So let's go ahead and finish off this URL session. So let session equal URL session dot shared, and then session dot data task. And we're gonna do this one because we have a request and it has to be this way for multi-part form data. So we'll pass in our request. Just do data, we'll do response, we'll do error, and then if response, or hold on, if let response is equal to response, then move forward, and we're just going to print out the response to make sure that we get that 200 that we so desperately want. And then also if let data equal data, not dat, I don't want dat, dude, dat, then we can go ahead and do try, because we have to get the JSON back, right? So catch print error. I don't think there will be an error, so this should be fine. So do try, and then we'll let JSON equal try JSON serialization, right? And then we want to do the reading options, right? Because we want to read the data or whatever. So pass in the data, and then reading options, whatever, nothing. And then we want to just print this JSON. All right, so this is like the majority of the hard part, guys. You guys got it over the hump. This is the hard part. So if everything goes well, then we should be able to get back all the users using the multi-part form type GET request. Notice that I didn't have to specify that it was the HTTP method was GET, because it's default for requests, which you probably already know, or you should probably already know. You know, a little bit less coding here, but yeah. So if we do GET, what happens? Oh, big mistake. Make sure that I'm glad that I messed up, because make sure you do dot resume, or else nothing happens, as you saw. It's a great mistake to stumble across. Also, I didn't do that because I didn't do another thing, which is allow arbitrary uploads or loads or whatever it's called. The app transport security, I didn't have to mess with that because this is a HTTPS. This is a secure URL. If you're using this method on HTTP website, then you're gonna have to do the allow arbitrary loads and whatever. And I don't have a video on that, but somebody else does. They're all over YouTube. You guys can find that. So as you can see, all the data's in here. Got the status code to 200, which is what we want. And then we also have all the different, what is it, users? Yeah, users in here. We have the 10 different users. So it was clearly successful. But now I want to do a post request, right? This is where you actually want to use the multi-part form request. The only time that you would use a GET request and a GET multi-part form request is probably because the server hasn't been formatted to allow JSON, which servers aren't by default. They don't default to allowing JSON. JSON's relatively new, not brand new. It's just relatively new, and multi-part form requests were the way that things used to be done by default. So If you have a server that's not working with JSON for whatever reason, then you do have to use this, but that's usually not the case nowadays. So I'm gonna just copy and paste all this stuff in here. Never do that because there's always problems when you do that. But this time we're going to be doing a couple of different things. So one of the things that you have to make sure is different is that the request HTTP method is set to post. Right, so you want to make sure that you do that, or else you're gonna be like, what's going on? Nothing's working. Well, you're trying to do a get request with parameters and all this other weird stuff. So we also want to have some type of parameters in here. We'll let our parameters be equal to just this for right now, because well, string. This is where we're actually going to get into the Imager API. Okay, so that's working. All right, so what you're going to want to do is just go to Google. You're going to type in Imager API right there, and just click the top one, API endpoints, right? It'll take you to this page. Don't worry about this, but this is the part that's important. You want to go down to image, and you're going to want to do the post request. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to pass in the route, right? So I'm going to pass in this route. Make sure it is the post request, so I'm going to pass this in. All right. And then also I want to look at what's required, right? So the key has to be image, and that's required. Everything else is optional, but just so that I could show you, even though it's optional and I don't have to pass any of this stuff in, I want to pass it in so that you guys can see what kind of what the difference would be. The type of the file that is being I'm not going to do that. Let's just do I'll do name and description. So let's do that. So let's get rid of this name and my test file 1233321, because we want to make sure that there's no conflicts with any other files out there or whatever. Also, we wanted to do description, so description, and we'll just call this my tutorial test file, for multi-part form data uploads, right? Whatever you want. You can play around with this Imager API as much as you want. Next, what else do we have to do? So first we want to get an image in here, right? So we want to be able to have an image. So let me show you how to do that. Usually you're gonna pull your image from the app. I have this test image that I'm just gonna drag in to my project. No, I don't want to do it like that. I want to put in the assets. I don't have to do it in the assets, but it just makes things a lot easier if I do it the way that I'm used to doing it. Just put it right here, and now my test image. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but you can actually pass in an image. You can pass in an image by just referencing the image. So let me show you what that looks like. So let's just make sure that, remember that our media type is a failable type, so we want to make sure that we can actually get it. So we'll call this one media image, and that's going to be equal to media. and we're going to initialize it with the image, and all we have to do is do test image. Watch this. If it comes up, see right here, test image. If I just press enter, look, it even puts the little image right there, and you don't have to create it from a UI image. It automatically generates a UI image using this reference. It's really cool. All right, and then for key. So remember that the key is the name in here, right? So the name, and remember I said the name is going. Sorry about the dogs in the background. The name is going to be the name of the parameter that they're expecting. So as you can see over here, the required, this is like the key. See, key. This is the name when we're constructing the data body, and we want to call it image. So that is extremely important to understand. So we'll call this image. It's usually going to be called something like image, photo, thumbnail, video, whatever. But you just want to make sure you check with your API and make sure that you're sending the right thing. And then we'll just finish doing this. All right. So now we have our media, right? And then we also have to create our data body. And we're not going to be passing in nil right here anymore. Instead, we're going to pass in our parameters, right? And then remember that it has to take, the media has to be an array of media. So we're going to just pass in media as such. And it's just going to be an array with this one media in there. Oh, media image. I'm sorry. Media image, because we're just saying that it's an array with one object in it, which is media image. All right. Now, if you want to go ahead and try this right now, it wouldn't work, and that's because the Imager API does have some requirements. So you have to be authorized to post into their API, and you can do that. I don't know if you have to be signed in or not. I can't remember. That's something you're gonna have to test yourself. But if you go to right here to authentication, and you go to registration. Now you just type in your application name, and this could be whatever, and then just callback URL. I'm just gonna put it at Google. You could do whatever you want. I didn't really read to see what all this stuff does. I just needed to test to make sure that I can do what I needed to do. I think the email is necessary, so I'm just gonna call it blah 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 at blah.com. And then no, I am not a robot. I have to give tutorials. So from here, if I do submit, let's see, did it work? Yeah. So great. Now you can get started with the API. So I'm going to just follow this information. It says make sure that you pass around the authorization token here, or you do authorization through this method right here. So you want to specify client ID, and then you're also going to want to pass in your number, and then you're going to make sure that it is for the authorization header field. So we'll go back over here and see how I did set value, and it's all this other stuff, and it's for content type. Well, now after this, since the value's set, you don't want to do it right here, because the set value is like eliminating everything that came before it. So we'll do request dot add value. So this is just gonna append this to that, and remember what they said. So it told me to do, what was it? This client ID. So let's just pass in my client ID like that. And then it also said to do the client ID number with just a space. So just follow their instructions. And then we wanted to do it for the authorization header. So we'll just do that like this, authorization. And this should work. I believe this should work. Double checking it. Yeah, it looks like it might work. So let's go ahead and try it. If it doesn't work, then I might have made a typo, and it's going to be a pain to go back and debug some of this stuff. But let's see. Let's see what happens, guys. Risk factor is 9,000. We do the post. Status 404. So no image data was sent to the upload API. Now, why would that be? Request image post. HTTPS. That's really weird. I'm not really sure where I went wrong, and it could have been a number of places, so that's the bad thing about this. Alright guys, sorry about that. So like I said, this is a very sloppy thing, so if you make any little mistake, it's going to not work. So after about, I don't know, 20 minutes to half an hour, I don't know how long it's been, I was looking through, I couldn't find the problem, and you guys probably saw the problem. It's right here. You see? It's little things like this that will trip you up. And that's why it's not good to go through and write this out. It's good to have it in a project where you just have all the information right there and just have a media class and maybe parameters type alias, and then just copy and paste this from project to project, because this stuff will never change for the most part. So name equal. I haven't even tested this out yet, so let's double check and make sure that it's gonna work. But it really should work. It really should. I'm hoping that it works. Alright, so let's go ahead and do this, and hopefully we won't get a 404 error. I think we should be getting a 201 error if everything works out as expected. Bam! You see that? See how it worked? So everything that I said in here was correct. It's just, typos happen like that, and I'm like really bad at typing and talking. Like, I don't do that. So as you can see, it comes back with all this information, and then if I go, you see this link, it'll actually take me there. I'm so happy that I found it, because it was so annoying that stuff like that happens. But hey, it happens. That's what happens when you code. Alright, so if I go ahead and type, as you can see, it's a Imager URL. If I go ahead and press enter, bam! You see that? That is how it is done. Bam! Multipart form requests. The ugliest thing that you'll probably see in Swift. Hopefully it'll come to Foundation where they make changes. Maybe add, like, instead of JSON serialization, there will be multi-part serialization. That's usually what I do on my own projects. I'll make a class that's called multi-part serialization, have similar things like with objects and stuff like that. There's a whole entire data structure that you need to create around this, but sorry about it. Sorry that it took me a while to get to it. Hopefully you learned something today, and see how complex this stuff really is, and maybe understand why it's so advanced, because I had to do all this stuff just to get one thing working. Whereas in Alamofire, I mean, maybe Alamofire is probably, the amount of code that you have to write is probably like that long, maybe like 10 lines long, and then you get your post request. But once you have this in place, I mean, it's essentially doing the same thing, but and you can optimize it, you can change your request, you can do different things on your request, but all this stuff is like the boilerplate stuff that's necessary for just to get it up and running. So yeah, let me go ahead and, I mean, since I already wasted all your time, and if you're still watching this, more power to you. But since I spent all this time doing this, let me go ahead and put it up on GitHub so that you can actually get this. Now, I'm not sure if my key is going to work. You're going to definitely want to go out and do your own Imager key. Go ahead and feel free to abuse it. I don't really care. I don't use Imager. You can hack my stuff. I don't even see. It's called Testing Kilo. Like I didn't even have like everything's being posted anonymously. I didn't go through the proper procedures to get it posted underneath my name or anything like that. But yeah, if you guys want to just abuse it and make me look like an idiot to Imager, then go right ahead. But I highly recommend you go through the process yourself. Learn how to go through and kind of read some of the API documentation. I mean, everything that I went through is all you really need to do. But if you want to just use my own key, then like I said, go ahead and do that. All right, so let's go over to GitHub. And if this video was helpful and you think that somebody would benefit from this, I know that I ramble and I'm not really great at explaining stuff, and it takes an hour and a half to 2 hours just to explain one thing. I know that's a problem, but I try to be pretty thorough. You might be able to find somebody else that goes through and just copies and pastes it, and they explain line by line what they're doing. But I hate when I watch tutorials like that, because I feel like copy and pasting it's not what I like to do. And even though I'm telling you to copy and paste it into a new project, copy and paste this code into a new project, at least you'll understand why and how it's working and things like that. So URLSession, and I'll just call this Multipart form data MPFD. Code from tutorial on URLSession multipart /form data. Sure, read me, why not? Alrighty. Alright, let's get this going. So just like any of my projects, you guys can always this is not in the right section. Hold on. I'm not good with copying and from command line. KL learning. Just like all my tutorials, you can find this entire project in GitHub. Everything that I wrote down, it's going to be there. I'm not making any modifications, going through adding comments and stuff like that. I'm hoping that this tutorial will do it for you, even though it's extremely long. At least whatever, you have all the information that's available to you. Whether you choose to go through the information or not, that's up to you, and I understand why you wouldn't. Change directory, and then this is URLSession Multipart form data, and then we're gonna get init get remote add origin get pull origin master get push origin. Oh wait, hold on, I gotta add it. Hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Get add get -am finished tutorial and fixed bug 2. Whatever, I don't know. Well, you have to put a commit. Hello. See, this is what got me into that bug in the first place. Get commit am. There we go. Get push origin master. Alrighty. And that's it, guys. It's all up there. So if you've watched this entire video, then now you completely understand how multipart form data works in URL sessions. Or maybe you don't completely understand how it works, because I don't even completely understand how it works. You need to be like a web developer to really understand everything that's going on, but I did try to break it down as much as possible for you guys. If you did like the video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below if there's anything else that you want to learn over the course of 2 hours. Also, make sure you give me a follow on Twitter. My followers is garbage. I don't really post that much though, so I mean, I'm not really causing all kinds of attention. It just makes me feel good when I get likes, when I get subscribes on YouTube, when I get like read my articles. I like when you guys see this type of stuff and you guys leave me like a little heart, or you like, or whatever it is on the platform that it is. But these little things make me feel good on the inside. So if you did like it, then like it, please. Go ahead and check me out on Twitter, stuff like that, guys. All right, that's all. I'm done. If you have any questions, once again, comment, tweet, whatever. This is Kyle Lee, aka Kilo Loco, signing out.